Yes, there are a lot of foundational old school methods that still work and are relevant today, but there's also a different way to approach things. I've paid for and joined some of the programs of these staples in the retriever community, and I was seeing some of the things such as ear pinch. My initial interpretation of it, it was full of conflict. I felt that it was more of an avoidance behavior, and on face value, I was looking at it that the dogs were perceiving whatever item you were trying to have them fetch as being the cause of that pressure. It didn't make sense to me. I thought that there was a much clearer way from what I've seen with some of the higher trainers around the world. These guys are asking these dogs to do fantastic, incredible things, and they're doing it with heart and soul. The behavior itself is the reward, and they're truly doing it to the best of their ability and having a great time doing it. And I've seen some of these other dogs that look like if they could slit their own wrists in the middle of this process, they would. And I was in pursuit of a better way. While I was watching this stuff occur, a lot of these trainers were getting by, pushing dogs through their programs, maybe because the dogs just had rock solid genetics and they were able to fight through it and had the grit. But how many dogs did they wash out that couldn't meet the standard that they wanted, that really probably could have been a fantastic retriever or a dog in general, but they washed it out because it didn't take to that style of training, you know? And that's where it's about training the dog in front of you. Maybe it works for one dog, but not the other.
All right, we're here with Chris Arminini, a full send canine. Go figure, we have one day to come in here and shoot this and do a podcast episode and show your whole steps of your, I guess, newer approach of force fetch that we're going to get into. But it's storming, and we're going to make do with whatever we can. So for anybody listening to this, this is going to be kind of a visual representation as well. So if you haven't followed us on YouTube, it might behoove you to go over to YouTube and follow us, because we're going to be referencing a lot of the stuff, a lot of the setup. This initial conversation is going to be more top level, hit the high waves, and then we're actually going to get the dogs out and actually show the steps that we're going to discuss on this. But first, let's go ahead, introduce yourself, kind of tell everybody what it is that you do, how you fell into this world, and then we're going to start tearing apart force fetch and going through step by step.
All right. My name is Chris Arminini. I'm a dog trainer from South Florida, full-time deputy sheriff, but I do the pet dog training on the side. While I was with the sheriff's office, I was afforded the opportunity to be a canine handler and an assistant trainer for one of the largest canine units on the East Coast. That really opened my world up to train with some of the best people in the world. Bart Bellin, Dick Stahl, guys from all over the world. So that's kind of where I got my foundation as my real introduction into real dog training. I grew up with dogs, but I never knew what I was doing. You know, that was the first formal dog training I ever had. So while in the canine unit, it came very natural to me. And I was asked to be an assistant trainer, where my forte was basically obedience, tracking, and detection work. From canine, I went into a specialized surveillance unit, which I'm in now. And I launched my pet dog training business on the side. I've really found that the pet dogs has been a huge education for me, because I'm not dealing with Ferraris every day.
Right.
I'm dealing with dogs that have a lot of baggage, and that's truly where I've pushed my limits and honed my skill into changing my processes to each and every dog and being able to train the dog in front of me. And it's all about having a full toolbox. So circling back to in canine, that's where I met my mentor, Justin Rigney, who's been in the NePoPo dog training system probably since it started. I think he started back in 2014, 2015, and I started training with him 2015, 2016. So my entire foundation was based on NePoPo principles. So I applied that to the pet dog world. Fast forward to now, I've really been intrigued with the retriever world of training. Looking at what the retrievers are asked to do in hunt test scenarios, it's way more technical than any police dog I've ever trained. There's an obedience standpoint of it. You're dealing with high drive dogs, there's retrieve, there's directionals, and the fact that we're communicating with these dogs over great distances really pushes the foundations that the dogs know, and really pushes me as a trainer to see how far I can go. So, yeah, I got involved with the retriever stuff, and I was seeing how, you know, I'm new to it. I've only been doing it maybe 2 years. I was seeing what some of these guys are doing. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. So being that I was in a NePoPo background, I went to Silver School with Bart Bellin in Missouri quite a few years ago, and I've gone to multiple gold schools with other gold multiplicators. It really put me in pursuit of trying to produce the best retriever that I can. And yes, there are a lot of foundational old school methods that still work and are relevant today, but there's also a different way to approach things. And it's all about training the dog in front of you and what's the best tools for them, not what might be best for me.
Yeah. And I think what you just touched on at the end, like I want to reiterate that and almost, we can call it a disclaimer if you will, is like you said that the more traditional or what people envision of force fetch is what you're saying when you got into it. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense to you. And that's the key thing, is it didn't make sense to you and you went searching for another approach and another method. And this is something that, like, the longer I do this show, the more people I talk to, like, people are searching for a more modern approach or outlook on force fetch, because to your point, force fetch has worked for decades, generations,
for sure,
without problems, but that also doesn't mean that we can't improve upon it. And we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but if we're not trying to build off of the trainers and the systems before us, we're not trying to improve anything. So I'm a huge advocate of, don't take everything new as gospel, because if you just take everything at face value, then you're always going to be switching and changing, and you're on to the next bigger thing every time. But that's why, like, when I'm speaking to some people such as yourself or Rigney or anybody, it's like it's more thoughtful. You guys can give an approach. And so I'm curious, what were some of the aspects in the more traditional force fetch programs that didn't really make a whole lot of sense, or at least were maybe a little concerning for you?
Yeah. So, I've paid for and joined some of the programs of these staples in the retriever community. And I was seeing some of the things such as ear pinch. My initial interpretation of it was full of conflict. I felt that it was more of an avoidance behavior to accomplish the goal. And on face value, I was looking at it that the dogs were perceiving whatever item you were trying to have them fetch as being the cause of that pressure. And it didn't make sense to me. I thought that there was a much clearer way to show this. And, coming from what I've seen with some of the higher trainers around the world, these guys are asking these dogs to do fantastic, incredible things, and they're doing it with heart and soul. Like, the dogs truly the behavior itself is the reward, and they're truly doing it to the best of their ability and having a great time doing it. And I've seen some of these other dogs that look like if they could slit their own wrists in the middle of this process, they would. And to me, that's not fun. Like, I want to have fun with the dog. I want the dog to have fun during the process. And I was in pursuit of a better way. And going back on that, I felt that while I was watching this stuff occur, a lot of these trainers were getting by pushing dogs through their programs, maybe because the dogs just had rock solid genetics and they were able to fight through it and had the grit. But how many dogs did they wash out that couldn't meet the standard that they wanted, that really probably could have been a fantastic retriever or a dog in general, but they washed it out because it didn't take to that style of training.
Right.
And that's where it's about training the dog in front of you. Maybe it works for one dog, but not the other. So, with the pet dog stuff, I've really learned to just have as big of a toolbox as I can and on the fly recognize what is going on and adapting to it. Working with an animal that has their own desires, wants, and needs. It's dynamic, and you're in a flow state, dancing with the dog, trying to figure out how to get them. You're manipulating them to get them to produce what you want.
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest foundations, or I guess when people talk about force fetch or I guess the defense of it is like, well, what happens when your dog doesn't want to do it, right? Like if we're in a duck blind on the Snake River and it's iced over and it's 20 below or whatever, if that dog decides he doesn't want to do it, and then we have to be able to make them do it.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about your program essentially builds the dog that does want to do that.
Yeah.
How does that differentiate when we're talking in the gun dog world, where there are instances where, like, hey man, like you have to have that mechanism to drive the dog if necessary.
For sure.
As well.
So with all behaviors that, NePoPo teaches, and the style of teaching is, we want the dog to feel like they're the inventor of the behavior. We then overlay that behavior with negative reinforcement, teaching the dog that they can turn off this nagging sensation once the behavior is completed. Negative reinforcement is a catalyst to prepare the dog for positive punishment of the you must day. Because by showing them, all right, we teach the wanted behavior first. We overlay a nagging sensation, whether through slip lead, e-collar, or a combination of both. They learn that the behavior turns it off. Then they get rewarded on top of that. So the first knee is the negative reinforcement. The first positive is them producing the behavior, which turns off that negative reinforcement, coupled with a follow-up positive reinforcement. And that really solidifies the behavior. So by teaching them in that pattern, the day of the you must, they're prepared for that pressure and understand how to turn it off.
Yeah.
So, and we do set them up for that to proof them.
Yeah. And it almost becomes where the pressure becomes conditioned to where their first default or instinct when they feel pressure is it's going to be good, because they know at the tail end of that, take it to its logical extreme, that like, oh, this is going to be a good thing at the end, whether it is a bumper or payment or, you know, another form, kibble or ball, whatever. So that it's, I do want to stop, like, we don't have to spend too much time on this because we've covered this, you know, ad nauseum on other episodes, but you mentioned negative reinforcement, negative positive. Go ahead and give the spiel on the quadrants, operant conditioning, you know, classical conditioning, where all that falls in line, because this program, if you don't fully understand that, you know, you don't have to memorize it. You don't have to be a BF Skinner fanboy or anything, but you do need a working level of knowledge for this to make sense to you.
So Bart Bellin actually refers to this system as the alpha omega. You are working in all four quadrants, sometimes at the same time, multiple quadrants on the fly, and you really have to have a good understanding of the quadrants to understand what you're doing. So we have positive punishment, negative punishment, positive reinforcement, and negative reinforcement. Think of it as math, right? A lot of people associate the positive and negative as good and bad, but it's not. It's adding to or taking away. And that clears up a lot of it for most people when they start thinking of it as a math problem. So positive punishment, I'm adding something to the training scenario to end an unwanted behavior or bring a behavior on. I'm adding to, which would be positive reinforcement. I'm adding kibble or a toy to the likelihood to produce the wanted behavior. Negative reinforcement is taking away something. So for instance, think of your seatbelt alarm in your car. It's a nagging sound. What it wants you to do is put your seatbelt on. So the ding, the alarm makes you put it on as fast as you can, and then it stops. So anything, that you have neutrality. So the taking away of a stimulus is negative reinforcement. And then you have negative punishment, whereas you're taking away what the dog wants, whether it's removing him from the situation or removing the reward or the opportunity for reward. It's like, hey, buddy, you had your opportunity. We're done. That's your negative punishment. We're removing you and or the reward from the training scenario. Yeah.
And classical conditioning, where does that fall in on this?
Yeah, so this incorporates operant conditioning and classical conditioning. More likely, the classical conditioning with this is when we start naming behaviors. You know, dogs are in the moment creatures. So, you know, a behavior needs to be reinforced or enforced within a second to a second and a half of it occurring from to pair it to the said behavior. So if we can predict that the dog is about to fetch the item, like it becomes a predictable event, that's when I name it. So if I present the item, he's about to come and take it, I say fetch. Through classical conditioning and repetitions, fetch becomes the command of bite or retrieve, whatever it is that I'm presenting. And then same with out on the back end of it. And the beauty in this system, once we dive deeper into it, we are literally teaching the retrieve, the hold, the out all in one. And another big thing that I love about it is that the hold is implied. Like that isn't being taught. It's not being named. It's you're fetching. Your hold is implied until I say dead, give, drop, whatever my out command is.
Yeah.
So
I think it's important to note that, because even in the gun dog world, we call it hold conditioning.
Yeah.
But people still want to kind of create that as a separate command. And to me, I equate it the same thing as, do you give your dog a sit, stay, or do you just say sit and the stay is implied?
Yep.
Right? Like it's built up into it. Can you call it out? Can you pull it out if you want? It's your dog. Have at it.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't have to, right?
Yeah.
Like if you do fetch, the hold is implied. If you do sit, the hold and the duration is implied.
Yep.
So, it's your prerogative. If you want to call it something different, you can do that, at least in the traditional.
I'm a big fan of less is more.
Yeah.
Maintain whatever behavior I put you into until I tell you otherwise.
So back to the quadrants and the negative reinforcement is, again, it's a math equation. Don't get caught up too much on the nomenclature or the initial response of what you might think the word negative means in this sense, because at the end of the day, the traditional force fetch programs are negative reinforcement. It pretty much almost unanimously lives in that one quadrant.
Yep.
And you're not doing very much positive reinforcement, right? You can, there's some punishment worked in there. So you're working in 2, maybe even 3 quadrants, but it's lacking the positive reinforcement, which is encouraging that behavior to move forward.
Yeah.
Negative reinforcement also encourages it also, but you're working with kind of a half-loaded gun there, right?
Yeah.
Like you have a double barrel shotgun, only one barrel's loaded here. And so, there's a lot of people that your program goes into like a completely different program, but I do know that there's others out there that's just like, hey, just pay on the back end of it, and then, do your traditional force fetch program and just pay on the back end and see how that works.
It increases that behavior reoccurring.
Yeah. It's that simple.
Yeah.
But to your point, one of the things that didn't make sense to you and your concern almost was how the pressure was being applied.
And the timing.
And the timing. So let's start with the pressure first, because when people hear force fetch, they're automatically going to go into either ear pinch, toe hitch, e-collar, or no pressure at all, and we're only doing purely positive, because you do have that side of the spectrum too, to where there is no negative reinforcement, or at least they don't acknowledge it anyway, and all they're doing is paying. So, let's start with the pressure and where that falls in line here. What does your program really stem on if we're not ear pinching or toe hitching?
Yep. So after I get through the first steps of the program, where I have the dog fetching the item of choice on command, holding it for duration, and dropping on command, that's when I start to overlay pressure, right? So the dog is typically back tied on a table, and the tables that I prefer aren't the traditional force fetch style tables where the dogs can run side to side on it. What I want is something like this with isolation sides that gives all the dogs focus forward. I want everything coming to me.
And so an isolation side is essentially, if you're looking at this table, you almost have a wall on both sides to where they're just focused straight ahead.
I want all energy and focus coming forward towards me. It reduces the avenue of escape, and it says, hey, I'm the only fun thing here.
There's nowhere else for you to go.
No.
There's nothing else demanding your attention.
Anything good comes right here.
Yeah.
So it really helps build engagement, for sure, right? So after I have the dog fetching the item on command, has a hold, he's outing, that's when I start to overlay pressure, right? So what I'll do is the dog will be back tied on a flat collar, and I use a slip lead coming off the bottom of his neck. So can you put your hand through here?
Yep.
So you're the dog's mouth. I would then, what I also want is very neutral body language, right? I don't want to be in the dog's area. I don't want him thinking all the pressure's coming from me, which I'm pretty sure they do, but I don't want it to be overt. Like, I don't want there to be any conflict, really. So the dog is ready. He knows we've been doing this for quite a few days. He knows the game here. So what it is it's pressure on through the slip lead. I'm not choking him out. It's just a amount of pressure that's annoying. And he's like, he feels it, but it's not anything aversive.
Yeah. And so
Pressure,
if you're pulling that
yep,
way, he's
pressure
going to
on.
naturally do this
Yep.
opposition reflex,
Yep,
right?
pressure on. Then it's fetch. As I present the item, pressure comes off. What I want the dog to realize is that once he sees the item that he knows and he's been fetching without pressure, now it makes that pressure go away the minute he grabs it, right? Or it's presented. I don't want it to be pressure, 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 pressure until he grabs it. That's not what I want yet. That day will come. But in the beginning stages, we're teaching him pressure's on, pressure's off, fetch. The act of fetching makes that shit stop.
Okay.
So, and that's the preparation for the you must. There must be clear understanding of that. Now, once I do slip lead pressure, fetch, he's fetching, I overlay it with electronics. So that's when, if up until this point, like I start collar conditioning the dogs at 4 months, where I'm applying it to known behaviors at that point. This force fetch stuff, I'll start it right after they're done teething, or maybe they're at the later end, 5 months old. But they got to understand collar conditioning, which is the way I do. It's also a little bit different than a lot of the traditional guys. I do it very similar to this. So when I set the dog up for now, we're doing negative reinforcement with the collar. I'll throw that on here.
Same.
I like to, yes. I position the e-collar on the top of their neck.
So that
it's a tactile cue. It gives directional advice for the dog to go forward, right? So what I'm going to do here is turn on my little sound box.
So you have a sound box that when you press the e-collar button, it emits a sound.
Yep.
And it's not for the dog, it's for instructional purposes,
Yes.
right?
Yep. So what I'll do here is I don't even have to hold the remote. I have a finger kick, which allows me to fetch, apply pressure through the leash and the e-collar, right? So we're getting fetch. He's starting to realize now, because we taught him first, we're setting him up for success. We're giving him the answers to the test for everything. It's pressure through the leash first. He understood that. Okay, that turns it off. Now we're pairing that with electronics to where he knows how to turn that off. He's going to have the same reaction. We're helping him get through the process quicker.
And so let's slow down for a little bit, because this is audio, right? We're going to get to showing this on the actual dog itself, but this is really important to where your pressure, in the traditional sense, you're applying pressure until the bumper is all the way and it's secure in the dog's mouth. And here it's on the presentation.
Yes.
So think of anybody listening to this, you would pull up the bumper or object and the pressure's going until you put, it's in the dog's mouth. But here you're pulling the bumper from almost behind your back or in your pocket almost. And as soon as it's presented into the actual situation or the context of this session, that's when the pressure shuts off.
Yeah.
So can you clarify what that's communicating to the dog, that just the presentation of the bumper or object is good?
So leading up to this, obviously the dog has had a huge reward history of fetching the bumper from my hand, right? Now, what I also do with puppies is I'll free shape fetch separately from this, starting at 10 weeks old.
Yeah.
And that's the operant conditioning side of it, where I'll use typically a small dumbbell where it mitigates the opportunity to bite the ends, and they're only grabbing the middle, because what we want them is to grab the middle of a bumper and not cigar it, which some of the dogs do that. But this really helps center them on the right area. So outside of the force fetch, I'm shaping a retrieve in other sessions, much earlier than when I start this.
This is part of your puppy development.
Yeah.
And this is an important thing with your program. Like first off, let's continue down the free shape. And I want to slow down for a second here, because we're going pretty fast on this. So let's stick with the free shaping for right now. You get a young puppy, the dumbbell, that's a good insight to where you're thinking of the end goal down the road, to where everything in dog training is everything, right? So just by free shaping and getting the dog to like this object, but it doesn't even have the capability to grab things by the end, and it's only in the middle, that's going to make your life easier months down the road when you do get to this program.
Yeah.
So how do we get the dog to care about picking up that dumbbell? What is the free shaping process?
For me, every dog that comes into my pet program, every calorie eaten is a calorie earned. They get nothing for free. It's all existential training. So, which gives you huge engagement. You have what they need to survive. Once you have their stomach, you own them. And that's really where the manipulation comes into play. They want food, they're hungry. Now you have to see how good of a worker you are.
Pre-Mac principle.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first step with free shaping is getting the dog charged on a marker, whether it's a clicker, a verbal yes, the sound of a treat and train. I do all three with my personal dogs. At times I'll find my hands are too full to use a clicker. So my mouth is always here and it likes to talk a lot. So I can just say yes. And that has value. They know through classical conditioning, the word yes has value, that food is imminent, it's about to come. Pavlov's theory of classical conditioning. I do the same with the treat and train. And the clicker. So it'll be click food. I found that it was much easier to transfer to charge the marker of the treat and train once they understood the concept of a marker through a clicker or the verbal yes. Okay. Because what I would do is put 1 or 2 kibbles in the front of it. Dogs are very curious. He'll go there and be like, oh, there's food here.
Mark and pay.
Yes. Well, before he gets away from it, tone. And I can do it right here. And you'll see everything that I use, I modify to be hands-free. Okay. So this is my finger kick it comes like this from e-collar Tech. My clicker, I put on an elastic. I want to be able to do multiple things at one time. Sometimes I look like Mr. T. I have 3 different rings on, but I'm using them all. So I modified the treat and train remote to be hands-free. So I have some kibble already in there. The dog goes and investigates. It spits out a piece of kibble. They're like, oh shit, I got another piece of kibble. Before they leave, they eat the piece of kibble again. And I repeat this over and over. They already understood the concept of a marker from the clicker and the verbal yes. They catch on to this very quick. They start to look at it as good things happen when I hear that sound and I know where it's coming from. And it's not coming from me.
And for those listening, the treat and train is literally just, picture a little box that you're hitting a remote and a piece of kibble slides out. And this allows you to indirectly reward the dog, to where if you're giving the dog a piece of kibble out of your own hand, that's direct reward.
Yep.
And now you can send the dog away from you and get a reward away from you, the indirect reward.
Yep.
Not to get too far ahead, but is this now a good time to explain why that's so important in your program?
For sure. So, multiple reasons. All the pet dogs that I train, I want to build duration in the behavior. I want the behavior to become the reward itself very quickly. So I give room service. I'm marking and paying in position.
The direct reward.
Yes, I want them to be lazy in it. I don't want them to think leaving it is an option. After I get the behavior I want out of them, I say free, and I throw a piece of food away. You can now leave position when I say free. My personal dogs, I want quick, flashy, and fast into behaviors. So when you pay them out of a behavior, so if I mark, release, and reward out of the behavior, they want to get back into it as quick as possible to make the game start again. That's the beauty in this treat and train, is that I can go put it on the opposite side of the room, ask for a behavior, they produce it, then they go away and get it. And indirect reward is where the behavior makes the reward appear versus direct, the reward makes the behavior appear. You know what I'm saying? The opposites. Also, looking at this from a retriever standpoint, it kind of puts poison bird theory in their mind very early, because they know there's a reward out there, but they have to go do this other thing first
to get it
before they get it. And I personally think that it helps give clarity to them. They always know they're going to get what they want. They just have to do something first.
They have to pull the right levers in the right order to get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then that's also how it builds enthusiasm. That's how I always look at it, is direct reward, room service, as you call it, builds stability and duration.
Yep.
to where indirect rewards, rewarding, out of behavior, that creates the enthusiasm,
Yes.
that poppy, that flashy, like, let's go get it. And then that's where we were standing in the kitchen earlier, and Quinn was like grocery shopping, like, how can I jump on this and get paid? Can I jump on that? And we weren't even working for her. She was just like, let's see if I can turn this game on.
Hey, can I get that monkey to go give me something?
Right.
And you fall for it.
Yeah.
How many times did you give her kibble?
Hey,
Just because
you
she
want to
was
play a
being
game?
good.
Well, let's play a game.
But when you can make them think that they're the driver of this ship, that's when you get dogs that are free thinkers and wild. Like, you can really, the limits that we can do with them are endless. Once you can get them to start to think that they can figure shit out on their own.
So back to the free shaping.
Yep.
Is now we have the treat and train.
Yep.
You have your markers. You can click. You can say yes. You have that conditioning to where you can say good or bad to the dog to provide that clarity of like, yes, I want that. No, I don't want that.
And I want to reiterate to people that the beauty in the marker training is that it's basically taking a mental screenshot for the dog to understand what it was in that exact moment of time that caused the reward to occur. Like I said earlier, they're in the moment creatures. So you have a second to a second and a half to reward or correct a behavior for them to pair it to what it was. Now we're operating at the speed of sound, and we can't get much faster than that.
Yeah. Hey, stop right there, because I want to clarify something. Is we have a second to second and a half to pay or punish or correct that behavior. That doesn't mean that you can mark that within a second and a half, but you don't have to pay as you mark it. And I think it's important to distinguish. A lot of people confuse and they conflate the two to where marking and paying are two separate things.
Absolutely.
You can mark, and then that anticipation of the time, that whether it's 3 seconds or 5 seconds for you to go, monkey, go get the treat and give it to the dog like we just talked about, all of that matters because the snapshot, you clicked it. That
he knew what he did.
Yes, he knew exactly what he got marked for.
And a big problem that I see of maybe people that don't have a lot of experience with a marker is multiple things. They're marking and moving at the same time. So they'll mark and move for the reward. What you did is you marked the dog looking at your hand, going for the reward. There's so many small nuances that experience really helps you fine tune.
And that goes another reason why you like these things in your hands. We want to talk about the finger kick. I've been playing with that on my e-collar. It's so valuable to be able to be standing here, not moving, not giving any cue. And you can either apply pressure for negative reinforcement, or you can give punishment or correction without moving your hands. There's nothing for the dog to associate yourself as a separate cue or a requirement. It's funny how like dogs—
You're not projecting anything.
Yeah, a dog will take your action and throw that into the sequence or the chain, and then it's just like it's something that you can get over it. Yeah. But if you can avoid from adding in those little extra things that you have to later on fade out anyway, the smoother and more efficient this process is.
No, for sure. Another big thing I see is people anticipating giving a reward, so their hand's in the cookie jar the entire time. And I'm like, get your fucking hand out of the cookie jar. Like, that doesn't, it's about the dog. Your marker will tell him exactly. You don't need to, he knows the reward's coming once you click. It's a promise that you made to him. That's another thing. If you click a behavior, I don't care if your timing was screwed up and you clicked the wrong thing, you must pay. Yeah. Our checks don't bounce. Like, it's not a perfect world. I can't tell you how many times I've clicked the wrong thing. I'm like, I won't do that again. It's okay, as long as our repetitions are always in the right direction.
And again, when we talk about Pavlovian conditioning, when it becomes conditioned with the dogs, back to the point that you don't have to pay immediately, the latency, I think their study is saying that it's like, 30 to 60 minutes that you can still pay later on if the conditioning is there, right? Like, you can't just start there. Like, you still have to build it up. But these dogs, you can literally mark and they can anticipate for a lot longer than what a lot of people might feel or think that you can.
I live by the motto, mark, then move. Like, I want to make shirts that say mark, then move. Best way to think about it is click, 1/1000, grab the food. Like, just give yourself a second. It's fine. Slow it down. Yeah. This isn't a rat race.
If you have to mark within a second to second and a half, give yourself a second to second and a half so that then your movement doesn't become conflated with the mark itself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So you can use that to your benefit as well. If it matters to where like a second and a half matters to actually mark it, then it matters for it to not become mixed up in this whole sequence, if that's fair to say.
For sure.
So back to the free shaping. You have your markers.
Yep. Dog understands it. It's charged. The goal of this day would be to ultimately the goal. What I want is for the dog to pick this bumper up and return it to hand. Right. But I don't ask for that totality of behavior in one day.
It's not fair.
No. I'm huge on chunking behaviors and working on micro components of the full behavior. So dogs they thrive in, what's the word I'm looking for? In environments that are predictable.
Controlled
environments, right? So I have my training area that I constantly train in. So when they know we go into this area, they're expecting good shit to happen, right? So what I would do, and you don't always have to use a treat and train. You know, I've only recently started using treat and trains because I found the benefit of it. And honestly, I don't want my hands fucking nasty all day long. So you can have...
Yeah, anybody that's worked with kibble in the pocket or whatever, I think I got a stain on these shorts just from that.
Yep. So we come into our training area and I have my dumbbell or my item that I want the dog to ultimately retrieve and deliver to hand. Mm-hmm. He's never seen this before, right? Comes in and he looks at it. Mark and pay.
Give me my payment.
Yep. He's like, oh shit, I looked at this thing and I got paid. He's gonna look at it again. So we're shaping the behavior of him right now, just looking at this item. So every time he looks at it, I mark and pay. Where you're gonna start to see is it becomes a predictable event, right? And what I'm doing is I'm using successive approximation to get him to go grab it.
And that's a big word. That's a $10 word for a 5-cent head here is successive approximation. The way I say it is like honing in, right? Like picture you have a wide lens and you're narrowing it in, you're zooming it in gradually, successive approximation.
So I'm rewarding small behaviors that show intent to what I ultimately want.
Right.
So the next rep, you know, it could be the next day or whatever the case may be. Depends on how well the dog's doing.
Take a step towards it.
Yes. He might look at it and I do nothing. And he's going to look at it and he's going to look at me. And he's like, dude, this is just working.
Yesterday it paid me. I got paid just for looking at it.
So we want frustration because frustration and struggle builds skill. And we're teaching the dog how to learn. And a lot of people don't allow their dogs to learn how to learn. And we're teaching them how to learn. And through struggle, they accomplish that. So he was getting paid for looking at it. Now he's not. I'm asking for more. I'm making my criteria a little bit more honed in on the total goal. So now he takes a step towards it. I mark and pay that. So now it became, I look at it, I take a step towards it. I mark and pay that. I then continue to build it to where he's touching it. Right? Through withholding and asking for more. And I'm not physically asking. I'm not a cheerleader by any means. I don't talk to these dogs at all. In my training, I'm silent. I want active dog, reactive handler. And I find a lot of people want to be a cheerleader. Oh, come on. Let's get it. Let's get it. Yeah. Does it work? Yes, but it's not the dog's idea.
That's luring, not free shaping.
No, we want this totally to be the dog's idea, the inventor of the behavior, because they will do it quicker, faster, and stronger every time they feel that they're the inventor. So sometimes that awkward silence is a huge learning moment for these dogs, and they need it. We can't be a crutch for them. So as I'm marking and rewarding smaller behaviors as they progress towards the item, I start asking for more. So at one point he could possibly be, now I had him, he was looking at it, he was walking towards it, right? Now he's nudging it with his nose. And I'll pay that, right?
Because it's just creating contact now.
Yes.
Before it was looking, now I'm moving towards it, now I'm touching it.
Yes, it's baby steps. After maybe he's nudging with his nose, I don't pay. And out of frustration, he grabs it. I'll mark and jackpot him and say, you get everything, baby.
And that literally sounds exactly like it said, just dump the treat pouch.
Yeah, you did the right thing. You did fantastic. We're done for the day, but we'll try again tomorrow. Now, with free shaping, we never go backwards. Once we accomplish one level of achievement, that becomes the new standard. We never go back. So if he, let's say, bites it or puts his mouth on it, we don't never pay him for looking at it. That's the new criteria. You must always put your mouth on it now. That's very important as well. So I then have the dog biting it, grabbing it. He's going to be, once you click, he's going to drop it for the reward, right?
Right.
So right now I'm shaping a fetch. Right now the clicker is kind of a cue to drop, right? And we'll get into naming it here shortly. But the dog is producing all the behaviors that we ultimately want without knowing it yet. So once I have the dog conditioned to seeing this item, going to it, picking him up, I'm marking and paying for that now. It's become a natural response to what I want. We start with the delivering to hand. Pat Nolan, I followed his from the Pup Up program, and he does something really cool that I would have never thought of. He will separately from this train the dogs to touch your hand with their nose, right? So you put your left hand out, click and pay. Left hand out, click and pay, just touching it with the nose, and your right hand, click and pay. Chunking that later on with when the dog has this item and I put my hand out, he's like, wait, I know what that is, but I have this. He's gonna come. He might drop it before he gets to you, but that's okay. We're shaping it. I'll mark it. He comes closer. Now I can grab it, click, and pay.
Yeah.
That becomes a new criteria where he's always coming. He brings the item. I put my hand out, which he previously learned to touch. I take it, I click, and I pay. So right there, we shaped a fetch, a hold, because we didn't say anything. We're not telling the dog to hold. He knows he must hold it until he hears the mark. He's coming to me, I'm marking, and I was...
For him to get paid,
yeah,
he has to hold it. He has to pick it up, then he has to hold it, then he has to deliver it. And this is all without cues, this is without luring, this is without cheerleading, this is without unnecessary commands and fetch and hold and
there's no banter. We're not talking just to talk. Also, when we're trying to build duration in the hold, yes, these dogs do anticipate the mark, right? So I might have the dog picking it up, holding it for a second, and then dropping it. I do nothing. Awkward silence. Figure it out, bud. He picks it up again and holds it for a fraction of a second. I mark and pay. I'm communicating to him it's the idea of holding it now, which is getting you the reward. And I slowly build out duration in that. So he'll pick it up, hold it, and look at me. 1,000, click. Next one, 1,002, click. And I'm building duration by withholding my marker for the length of period of time that I want to hold it. So that's how we kind of shape the hold with it.
Now, when you're free shaping, it's important to keep the behavior that you're after to mark in a realistic distance, right? Like it has to be attainable, because if you're standing there and like, say you jump from the dog looked at it to now the criteria is you have to pick it up and hold it. Yeah. That dog's never going to
make the
connect
connection.
That. So it goes back to what we always talk about. Keep those steps incrementally short, so that it gives the dog a chance to actually find success. Like you said, we have to make this to where like the dog can't fail almost.
Yeah, it's just micro behaviors.
So what do you do if you are in the scenario? There's no harm in, say you go in there and you're a little overzealous, like you took too big of a step, you're expecting too much. So like the dog doesn't understand that, like, hey, you know, I wanted the dog to deliver it to hand rather than just hold it for 2 seconds. But the dog doesn't know that you moved the goalpost down to meet him where it's at. what happens if you have a dog that just, it doesn't work? It doesn't click for the dog. He's not working for it. Like you marked it. So let's say that the dog now picks up the bumper. Now we're going for duration. And for whatever reason, it's just not connecting. Like how long are we doing this in that session to where it's not detrimental or you're just sitting there staring at each other for half an hour?
Yeah. So it depends on how long you've been training for that day, right? So like I keep my training a relatively short. A young puppy, no more than 10 minutes. And, they don't have a stomach that can handle it all and the attention span. But what I'll see is if I'm not getting the wanted progression that I was asking for, maybe I was asking for too much too quick. And I go back to what he knew and then try again tomorrow. But if the dog comes out and he's actually looking kind of flat, like he's not interested, it's okay. No negative punishment. We're taking away the food, go back in your crate. I'll try again in an hour. He's gonna realize, oh, I had the opportunity to eat and I didn't seize the moment. I'm not gonna let that happen again. So you can start to incorporate these.
And it's not even just eat, also the ability to engage with you. Pat, you're talking about pack drive there. They're just playing the game, working.
Yeah.
Like we want the dogs, especially when we're talking about working dogs, they actually want to go do something.
For sure.
So, it's beyond more than just you had the chance to eat. You also had the chance to play the game. You had the chance to work. You had the chance to interact and engage with me. So there's a number of things that you're kind of taking away from the dog by just doing it, getting rid of the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And that's the value of when we say you just go put your dog up. Like if the dog's just having one of those sessions, we've all been there. It's like, instead of just beating a dog over the head with a 2x4, just go put them up, make them think about it, right?
And what's funny is, I've seen dogs get wiffle ball batted minutes later, half an hour later after an event. They don't know why they're getting punished.
Yeah, that's more about the handler than it is
the ego.
Yeah.
Insecurity.
You embarrassed me in front of my friends.
Yeah.
So take this.
Yeah. And they just think you're an asshole.
Yeah. So with the free shaping, that's free shaping is honestly a whole nother topic in of itself. But you said all your dogs, any of the retrievers that you do with this, are you taking the time to free shape this? If somebody brings you a retriever for training, are you taking the time to free shape this? So like, I guess, let me rephrase this. I'm listening to this episode right now. My dog is a year and a half old, and I need to do force fetch, but I didn't free shape this when they were 3 months old. Do I go all the way back to free shape this, or are we just going to work through this on the table?
It can't hurt. I think you're going to get that reward history of grabbing that item and delivering it to you, which is going to help expedite the table work.
Yeah.
This is something where the more reps you put in, the better it's going to be.
Yeah. So we free shape this.
Yeah.
Is there anything between the free shaping of the retrieve and getting on the table and starting your step-by-step program, essentially?
No.
Okay.
No. Later on, as the dog matures, I'll overlay this with electronics.
Okay.
So once I have the dog picking it up, holding it, giving it to me, then I start naming stuff, right? So one day he's going to come in. He's going to see the dumbbell that he's picked up 1,000 times prior. The minute he starts to project he's about to pick it up, fetch. He picks it up. I'm classically conditioning fetch to it. Not saying hold. I put out my hand. He comes out or drop or whatever your command is. Mark and pay. Now it's 3 separate behaviors that he's producing and getting rewarded for. So I'll name this stuff before I get on the table. You can do it very early and quick, depending on how fast the dog's moving along.
So yeah, you've built up that association. The dog wants to do it. He knows I get paid for it.
Yep.
Now you're naming it. And so when we talk about all the time, like shape it, make the dog want to do it, then name it later, it's a far cry from where even I started out. I was initially taught that say the dog's going in a kennel, it's just like, you're almost luring him in the kennel, and the whole time you're going kennel, 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 and then you stop, and it's like you're almost making the command the negative reinforcement of the nagging. You're just nagging and hacking the dog, and then so you're almost making it to where it's a good thing when the command goes away. But I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is that dogs learn by doing much more so than the words have no meaning.
No.
They're not verbal creatures. Like
No.
just because they can start learning what we want through our language and words, that doesn't mean that that's primarily how they communicate.
Yeah, it's a pattern of sounds that they associate to a behavior.
Yeah, that's it. It is all the association that we're talking about, building up with dumbbell, building up with this, building up with whatever, fill in the blank. That's what we're doing with the naming.
Yeah.
So you name the fetch, you name the out. Where do we go from there?
So from there, we can go to the table. What I also like to do in this scenario is start to present the other items I'm going to want him fetching, right? So I started with the dumbbell because it doesn't roll. It can stay steady. It gives him a target area. From there, I can also start to incorporate the PVC pipe or a bumper. Any items that I figure I'm going to have the dog eventually fetching. Mm-hmm. I'm generalizing now. Fetch means it could be a bumper, it could be a pipe, it could be a dumbbell, it could be, I've done frying pans, I've done other things.
And everything. Yeah.
So
I've used table legs, jugs, whatever. This is where it's just like, to me, how much stock do you put in the variety of the items, the different types? Because I
like weights that are awkward.
I was about to say, I like different weights. I like different sizes, different textures, just for the heck of it, just to get the dog confident that it can do whatever. Because let's face it, there's a whole bunch of different birds and game out there.
Yep.
I don't want the dog getting to a standpoint of like, oh, well, I like this
I've never
bird,
touched
but not
that.
that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, you're not picky. You're not bougie here.
Right.
Fetch is fetch.
Yeah, this isn't Burger King. This isn't your way. If I tell you to fetch, go get it.
Yep. So it's a nice environment to introduce those new items because they understand it.
Yeah.
You know, so from there, I'll go to the table. And like I said earlier, I like the table to really be 2 foot wide by 5 or 6 feet long with sides.
So that's another thing. Obviously, my table is 16 feet long. It's a little overkill. You know, in the gun dog world, is you typically like 8 feet, but you rip a sheet of plywood in half, you have a 16-foot table there.
Yeah. This
isn't necessary in your process.
No, it's not. It doesn't hurt, but it's not necessary.
Don't be talking trash about my table.
It wasn't too light, so it's
the forklift made it pretty light.
Yes, it did. All right, so now focusing back on treat and train versus pouch, on this, during this process, you can use either or both, right? It's dealer's choice, but I'll explain why I prefer one over the other. So typically, first we need to acclimate the dog to the table, right? I made my force fetch table wobbly and awkward on purpose. I want tough dogs. I don't want dogs that need a perfect, stable environment to feel like they can act and produce.
It's great for learning, but when you're generalizing and proofing and all that stuff.
I want weird shit. Like so I have the base of my table is made out of an HDPE, like Starboard. It's a marine grade plastic, but it just sits in it and it wiggles and it wobbles and it warped a little bit. I didn't secure it to it on purpose. Like I wanted the dog to get on there, be like, what is this surface? Fight through it. Like this shit in my pocket is more important than your feelings. And it makes tough dogs. And that's important, you know? It's toughening without me having to do anything. They're toughening themselves by putting a priority on what they want.
Yeah.
So first thing is I get the dog up on the table, back tied to a flat collar, and I will just play engagement games here using the treat and train. So once he's on the table and he obviously understands what the treat and train is, I'll come here, and what I'm asking for is engagement, right? Ask me a question. And the way that the dog asks me a question is through his body language. Like maybe he comes out to the end of the table like, what are we doing? You know, I want active dog. His eyes are looking at me like, why am I here? Once I get that focus on me, I mark, he turns around and gets his reward from the treat and train. And I'll play that game a few repetitions just to get him first used to the table and understand that good shit happens here too.
And we just talked about indirect rewards creates enthusiasm. So he's going to hit that and then immediately come back to you. So if he's got to come over here, get paid, then he's back over here to you.
I want all the good stuff to happen here. Go there to get your reward. So once I can see blatantly that the dog is comfortable on the table, he's engaged, he's like, let's work, that's when I come into his space. And the first thing that I do is I present my hand, right? Ultimately, what I want him to do is lay his muzzle in my hand, right? The dogs don't know that. They might try to lick my hand, might nuzzle my hand. We're going to use successive approximation again. The same concept of shaping the dog to grab the bumper or the...
You're just going to hone in on that.
Yep. I'm going to lay my hand there. If he puts the little bit of his muzzle on my pointer finger, I'm going to mark, go get your reward. Now, there's some very important nuances to this that have to be the standard from the beginning. One is I try to line this up to where the dog's head is just inside the end of the table, because what I want to produce is a dog reaching out. I want him reaching out for my hand, because in reality, they're reaching out to grab a bumper or a duck off the ground. So that really shows, that really produces motivation and engagement to, I'm going to get it, because they're reaching out, grabbing something with their mouth, holding it, and bring it to us. So by having them to where they're barely just on the edge of the table, and I put my hand just outside of their reach, that really shows them they have to reach out and put their muzzle in my hand.
It wasn't just happy accident.
No, I'm not coming into your space. I'm not giving it to you. You need to come and get it. So that's very important. So if we start that behavior here, where he's reaching out to put his muzzle in my hand, I mark and pay, it transitions very easily later on to when I present the bumper, reach out and grab it. I see a lot of people with their dogs on force fetch tables sitting, grabbing their mouth, opening it, putting the item in their mouth. Nowhere near is that the dog's idea.
Right.
It's very conflicting. You know, it's like you're grabbing my head, you're shoving something in my mouth, and I don't want to be here.
And the only reason we're doing that is for the hold conditioning, which we already established. Like, we've already kind of shaped that and built it into everything else. So there's no need to do hold conditioning in that sense, to where, like, we should never be putting the object in their mouth.
No, I want the dog to be engaged. I want him to snatch it from me.
And that makes a lot of sense to me, consistency wise. If we're always talking about reverse engineering from the end result back to where we're at, it makes sense to where, like, we're never at the end goal of fetch or force fetch, us putting the object in their mouth. So, like, you know, why create something that you have to fade out later on?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So we start off, we have engagement, the dog's looking at us, we're in his space, just outside of his easy reach. He can still reach it, but I want him to be able to come lay his muzzle in my hand. I mark and pay. Then I start building duration on that. And if you notice, all of these behaviors are like things that they've seen before. So it's very easy for him to, once he understands, okay, I put my muzzle in his hand, I mark and get my reward. The next repetition, I might just sit there and wait.
Right.
Building duration in this is very quick and easy because he's understood that concept. So now I start to build duration here. Once I have it 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and his little eyes will be up looking at you, and he's steady and stable, like I want reach out, head in, sit there and wait. Click, go get your reward.
And so with this, if we're trying to build duration or stability, why wouldn't we do direct reward on that? If we're trying to build duration,
so
pay that and then go back to indirect later.
2 reasons.
Okay.
One reason is I love the idea of the treat and train behind him, because he has to remove himself from my hand, right? It isn't this. Muzzle in the hand. I'm not removing my hand from your mouth. You are removing yourself from my hand to go get the reward. Now, if I didn't have the treat and train, I can still do that. Muzzle in hand, he removes himself from it, I then get my reward and pay, right? That's shaping the out. I want him to remove his head from my hand to go get the reward. I don't want to remove my hand
it's
from.
Small details. It's not you taking items from them. It's them giving you the items.
Yeah. Yep.
Small differences, but we talk about everything in dog training is everything, right?
And it becomes very clear to them because they're doing everything. I'm doing nothing. I'm just giving them food and marking what I want. So, and they hold themselves accountable. And that's where, once we start getting into the punishment aspect of it, negative punishment or positive punishment, they're like, you're right. I fucked up, because I knew what I should have been doing.
Yeah.
Versus us throwing everything at them and punishing them for not knowing what to do. That's the big difference that I've seen. So now I have the dog consistently putting his muzzle in my hand, holding duration. What I do from here is different locations. So I start off usually pretty centered and eye level. Then I go offset. Each side, I go low. Generalizing that this can happen anywhere, right? Within the front of the table. So it's not always going to be directly in front of him. Once I have that pretty consistent, that's a day, that's a session in itself. They understand it very quickly. From there, the next step would be adding a second hand over the muzzle. So once again, we're approaching the dog. The second step is I present my hand. He lays his muzzle in my hand. I then apply my second hand over his muzzle. And I've called this the meat pocket. Like I'm literally making a pocket with my hands. And I want the dog's in complete muzzle covered by my hands, top and bottom. Now, if he backs out before I mark, which most are going to do initially, I disconnect. That's negative punishment. Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's negative punishment. You're removing all right, well, fine. You don't want to play my game.
I had the reward. You had your opportunity. I look for that engagement behavior again. That like to come back, please. I'll try again. I reapproach. Try it again. Now, if he doesn't back out, I mark and pay immediately. Right. I'm letting him know that now you have to accept this second hand over your muzzle. Right. That becomes the new standard. So rinse and repeat, and I start to build duration in that. And this starts flying by because it's everything that they've seen. So the reason I want the dog to accept both hands over his muzzle is this really becomes the fetch and the out. A dog must close their mouth first before they can open it. So he must close his mouth to get his muzzle into my meat pocket. And I do that in all the separate areas, left, right, bottoms. After that, it goes really quick. That's maybe a day or two. The third very important small nuance of this entire program is the dog accepting my middle finger and my thumb in his molars, or the area where a bumper would normally lay. And same thing again, it's not going to be very comfortable for them. They're going to wiggle and squirm. I step away. We'll try this again. I come back. If I get a split second of him accepting my fingers in his teeth, mark and pay. The reason this is so important is I see a lot of dogs have chattering issues with bumpers or any item that they're holding. And it's because they weren't taught any different. They were just happy that they had something in their mouth. Now, by being able to have the dog accept these fingers in his mouth, I can feel when he's applying steady pressure, and I can mark and pay that. If he's chattering on it, I'm not accepting that.
Yeah.
You're stable on your pressure, mark and pay. So that becomes the standard.
So contrast that. I want to stop and compare this to like the more traditional program, to where the bulk of the people are probably going to be advised. So when you're in whole conditioning, first off, back to what we already talked about, you're putting the object in their mouth.
Yeah.
Maybe you're starting with a gloved hand or whatever. You know, everybody's kind of program and initial steps are a little slightly different. But essentially you're doing that, and then you're automatically punishing them, any movement, any withdrawal, until they quiet their mouth. Mm-hmm. And then you say good. and pull out, right? This is kind of the same concept, but you're free shaping it to where you can really fine tune. Not only are they doing it wrong, which is, the tapping on the chin, saying, hold.
Yeah.
Now you're really able to mark like, yes, you did good. Like that amount of pressure,
moment
that's
in time.
exactly what I want.
It's precise.
Yeah, it's very precise. You're adding precision and clarity to this whole program.
Yeah. So once I have duration in that, and I will really stretch that out. 15 seconds isn't a problem, because I want to really hit home that that's what I'm shooting for. And also, everything that the dog has in their mouth isn't going to be comfortable. You got to, and not that my fingers are the most uncomfortable thing in the world, but it's really not natural, for them.
Yep.
So once I have that, I am doing it in all separate locations, right? Still haven't named anything, right? So we did hand in the muzzle, meat pocket, fingers in the teeth, building duration in all end locations. Once I've done all of that, this is when we start to introduce a fetching item, right? So if we take an item that we did our free shaping with, it's a very similar picture. They see it and they get excited because they know what it's all about,
right?
Versus trying to shove a piece of plastic down their throat. We have the dog on the table. And I typically like to start with PVC pipe. Usually like a 2-inch diameter one that's similar to the diameter of a bumper. But the reason being is if I have to get dirty with the dog with pressure and not accepting it, I'd rather make it dirty on an inanimate object versus an item that I want him retrieving every day, which is pretty important. So I start with the PVC pipe. Also, when these get covered in saliva, it becomes hard to hold. So now you're making something more difficult that he needs to be good at and create a solid hold on it. So once I'm at the step of presenting an item to fetch, I come out, I ask the same question. Every day I'm doing this, where I want to see the dog pull me in with his behavior, like, come on, let's rock and roll. I come in, the dog's standing there, I present the item. At first, he may not take it, but he probably will because of the foundational work that we did. If he doesn't take it right off the bat, same concept of successive approximation, how we did the hand, how we did the dumbbell. He puts his nose on it, mark and pay, make that the standard, start asking for more and more until he's grabbing it, right? So once we present the item, he takes it, and we're marking and paying, then we start to build duration on that said item. Once we have them taking it, duration, marking and paying, now we can start naming things because we've really got the fetch, the implied hold, and the out. So what I do is I present the item. Right, remember, we're keeping it right outside. They can barely get it. Like, I want him to give effort to grab it. We're not helping them by any means. As I start to see him give effort to grab the item, fetch, he grabs it, out, click, pay. Now, I don't care if they're dropping it, right? Because we will be proofing the delivery to hand. We're going to need our hands to do other things. Or if you have the treat and train, you can deliver it to hand, mark, and go get your reward. Whereas if I didn't have the treat and train, I would have to grab it, click, and then try to find a way to get him a reward, So either way, this is going to end up on the floor one way or another. That's why I'm a big fan of the treat and train. So we present the item, fetch, he fetches it, drop, I mark, go get the reward. He has to let go once he hears the marker to go get the reward. So that supersedes the marker sound, which creates value to the word out and anticipatory. Now, once over time and repetitions, when I say out, he's going to let go. Then that becomes the standard. So it'll be fetch, he holds it. Out, he lets go. Mark, reward. I shaped a fetch, a hold, and an out. And from what I hear on the internets, a lot of guys don't even teach an out. They just snag it from the dog. And he's like, why are you taking that from me, So
you just wanted me to pick it up. Now you're taking it from me.
And they are soft mouth dogs, and you might not necessarily have to have an out, but it's nice,
Right.
So
when we talk about providing clarity, cut and dry consistency, why is it okay to just snatch it from a dog without an out command on the table, but then later on when you're at the line and the dog drops it before you give an out, how can you get upset with that? Because
you didn't teach him that.
You didn't teach him that,
nope.
Right? So
there's no accountability.
Yeah, it's like it may not matter right now, but it will matter later on in a different context and everything. So all of this is making sense and everything. So like you have the fetch, you have the implied hold, you have the out, mark, and pay. So I'm assuming you just kind of rep and drill this until it becomes second nature, Pavlovian, conditioning, all that stuff.
So I do a lot of proofing at this point. I want all my proofing done before I apply pressure.
Yep.
So I have the dog fetching. I have him holding it for minutes. A very important key point is I have noticed and seen that dogs have a better hold when standing versus sitting. Some of the dogs that I see when they sit, they have certain muscles that are relaxed and they can jiggle. If they're standing while doing this, there's muscles that are engaged that create a better and more stable hold. That's just an observation that I made, and I think it's pretty accurate. I see it, with a lot of sport dogs.
Yeah.
They're less likely to drop it prematurely if they're standing, just because the muscles that are engaged are creating a better bite.
Gotcha. It's at least something to look out for.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't believe this at face value, but start paying attention. If your dog sits on the table, make a mental note. If your dog starts mouthing it, tonguing it, rolling it around or something, take note of whether the dog's sitting or standing, and then you be the judge of your own dog.
Also with the proper timing and marking that solid hold building up to this, it really eliminates that possibility, whether they're sitting or standing.
Okay.
So once I have them fetching, holding, and outing, that's when I really start to ask a lot of the dog, versus holding it for extended periods of time, fetching it in all different locations. And to me, the biggest thing is proofing the gestural cue of my hand. I don't want the dog to see my hand coming in and prematurely drop the item. So by approaching my hand, pulling it away, approaching my hand, pulling it away, approaching it, saying drop, mark, and pay, I show him it doesn't matter where my hands are. It's not, you must hold it until I say drop. I tap, I pull. I don't really pull too hard. I don't want to turn into a tug match, but I do show that picture in some sort. Then once I've done all of that, the benefit to having your table a little bit longer, with a helper on my table, I can put the item down, have the other person pull them back, let them go. As they're going in, I say fetch, and they pick it up off the table. I don't spend too much time on that. I just show it to them briefly, just because it is a familiar picture that they're used to fetching on. I think it helps transition to the ground relatively quickly, because they were doing it in the same environment. So once I've gone through all the proofing of holding, outing when told, no premature dropping, then we get into the aspect of applying pressure and the preparation for pressure through the slip lead. That's where we touched on briefly in the beginning. I have the dog on the table with the slip lead on. And this is where timing in all of this is very important, when you're marking and rewarding. So from here, it's pressure on, fetch, takes the item, out, mark, and pay. And I rinse and repeat that. If I present the item, fetch, and I let go, and he drops it, same amount of pressure used as negative reinforcement, drop it. Positive punishment now. He knew we've done this thousands of times. He knows. So it's not, I'm not hurting the dog. I'm not choking him out. It's not a VNR.
Pressure just comes back in.
Comes back in. Fetch. Do it again. So we were in negative reinforcement and positive punishment in the same repetition with generally the same amount of pressure at this point. We were just showing him you fucked up. Now it's constant pressure until I pick it up and give it back. And it shows the dog what he needs to do.
Now, do you already have, is there any value to having the e-collar on? You're not using it, but just getting the dog used to having it on.
You can.
Okay.
Obviously, the dogs are collar conditioned prior to this.
Yeah.
So they know what it is. It doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
Right?
Get fully dressed, whatever.
Yeah. Yep. And equipment becomes a cue to the job. So
that's why I was asking, like part of the routine, whatever. Yeah. So
it's fine. Okay. You can. So once I'm doing this with the leash, I then go through the same proofing protocol of holding duration. And that's where they start to learn that this shit comes back on if I let go too early. Once they take it again, the pressure comes off. So we're working with negative reinforcement.
Are you marking them dropping it and pressure on? So really the pressure coming back on is the marker.
Yeah. Don't do it. It sucks.
Yeah.
Once I do all of that proofing with just the lead, then I do the same shit again with the e-collar. Some guys might do it right off from the bat. A lot of it depends on the dog, but I don't see the purpose. It goes this stuff isn't weeks long. Like it goes really quick. Yeah. Once the dog starts understanding what it is asked of them, you can.
So let me play devil's advocate here. Somebody watching this or listening to this, especially right now in this stage, applying pressure. What's the difference between having a slip lead on the dog's neck and a toe hitch on the toe of the foot, right? You're still dealing, there's still some kind of divide connected by a leash or twine or string or whatever. Why is this more comfortable or makes sense to you rather than like a toe hitch?
Directional cue, right? Like we communicate direction in which we want the dog to go. So with this, there's going to be some opposition reflex, like I'm pulling you forward, you want to pull back. Well, when you give into this is when the pressure comes off and when you fetch. Where to me, I've never toe hitched a dog. I've never seen it in person. I've only seen it online. It didn't make sense to me. Maybe I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
But
so like to me, I've toe hitched.
Yeah.
And so if you have picture this on the toe, you're essentially applying pressure, and it's the same concept that the dog is then almost going towards its toe, and you can anticipate that, and you can have the object waiting right there, and the pressure just stays on until they get in the mouth. So really kind of the same concept.
Yeah.
But the difference is instead of pulling back on the neck, opposition reflex, they're going to be pulling back on their toe, right? Yeah. So they're almost applying pressure on the toe themselves, but it's the same concept, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it, but I just think that this gives directional cue how to turn it off.
And you already have the point of contact, you have communication, and it's through previous training. And
if you look at Mother Nature, it's very natural for a dog to get a correction around their neck.
Right. The point of contact. Yeah. Everything else up until the standpoint. I was just curious because it's just like, this is really just kind of a beefier toe hitch, if you will.
Yeah. And I can see the comparison for sure. So once we've done all this, we apply the e-collar on top, again, to reiterate directional cue.
Yep.
Okay. So it would be fetch. Takes the item. If he drops it, sorry, you dropped it prematurely. I didn't say out. Fetch. Pressure comes off.
Man, that e-collar's burning me.
Yeah. What level's it on? I don't even know. It's probably pretty high.
Oh,
a 3. A 3.
Yeah. I'm not even feeling it, man.
Yeah. So then we go through the same proofing foundation with the e-collar on top. And we've had the opportunity by now to work in negative reinforcement through the electronics and the slip. If they drop it prematurely or don't do what we want when asked, because we know they know it, positive punishment until they do it. And then once they do it, we still give positive reinforcement through marking and rewarding. Mm-hmm. And I find that a lot of these dogs, a lot of the old school trainers that have started to implement this, all they do is tell me how much quicker it's going. And they're saying, like, we want all good things to come from our hands, right? Yeah. And I think a lot of dogs develop anxiety and like nerves around people and hands.
And that's why I switched years ago from the ear pinch to the toe hitch. Mm-hmm. Is, you know, I was slow to adapt the toe hitch just because I liked having the context. I liked having the feeling. I felt like my timing was better. I felt like my consistency of pressure was better rather than pulling on a string. Mm-hmm. But to your point, that's your hand on their ear, right next to their ear. Like, there's no separation of what's causing this. And we were just talking about, we don't want the dogs picking up on any of our body language and misassociating like that we're causing it. We want them to always think that they're causing it. So I went ahead and I created that disconnect with the toe hitch, and I did see a better result from that. You know, you don't get the dog that, you know, you don't even have, even how slight it might be, you don't have that dog kind of like cringing down or
anticipating something bad.
Like trying to move away from your hand, even if it's short-lived. I didn't like that, right? Yeah. And that's where you went from like the conflict of the ear pinch. It's like, well, we can avoid that now.
Yeah, still get the same behavior, and the dog thinks that they're the inventor.
Right. So we've now overlaid the e-collar. The pressure means something. How we talk about driving the dog, drive to a pile, drive them across water, you know, drive them into water, you know, how let's talk transition into the ground and all this. Is it just kind of from here on out kind of the similar process as other methods, or do you have like different, you know, different little steps in there?
I think it's pretty similar. Like, I'm not too well versed in all that stuff. Granted, I'm through pile work with my dog and starting swim by, T work and all that stuff. So the way that like I pair e-collar with other behaviors, I'm going to do with everything, right? So for instance, place. Place is one of the first behaviors that I teach. Go away from me versus come to me. Mm-hmm. And I pair that with electronics. So the dog must obviously know what place is first. They must be addicted to it. I put the e-collar on. Place, gets onto place, stops. Yes, come to me for reward. Place, gets on place, stops. That just transitions to everything, to where it's sit, ass hits the ground, yes, every behavior.
Right.
Heeling, heel position, everything.
Fill in the blank, yeah.
So by being consistent with that, they understand how to turn pressures off very quickly with anything new that we throw at them, because it's been the same pattern.
And you condition the fetch just like you condition the place and whatever.
And I'm doing all that stuff before I get here.
Right. And so and that's what I mean, like, especially this last venture through force fetch with Quinn, like I was so much better. She had such a clear understanding of pressure on, pressure off through all of the other stuff that we've worked in, that by the time I got to the table, I almost felt like I didn't even need the toe hitch. Yeah. I really felt like, I'm like, is this even necessary? I went through it just to, you know, peace of mind. It's like, I'd rather, let's just do it and get it over with. But I didn't feel like she needed it. And to your point, like these dogs, when they're operant, they know how to turn pressure on and off and get paid. It's second nature, right? And so like then you move down to the ground and you have a bumper, you know, 10 yards away. Like it just makes sense. So I was just curious though, like when you go onto the ground, are you doing any of the like walking heel fetch on a lead at all? Like are you only on e-collar now that we've overlaid it, or do you go back to the slip lead once you get back on the ground?
No, I'm only on E at that point. Now, I think I have some videos of it. So I'll lay out random bumpers. I still keep the collar on top because we're still in a kind of a learning phase. We've changed venue, and we're asking for a behavior that they've shown that they know. So I try to keep it as similar to here as possible. So keeping the collar on top, they're like, oh, I remember what that means.
Yeah.
You know, the same way with the pet dogs, I shape down, I put a collar on top to push them down. So, and I'm not asking for like a formal heel. It's kind of a casual walk. We approach the bumper on the ground, fetch. The minute he grabs it, pressure comes off. Because now, we're not doing high levels of pressure. This is negative reinforcement level. And a lot of the times, like, your negative reinforcement level and positive punishment can be the same. It's just when it's being used. A lot of people think a correction needs to come and a dog needs to be vocal or whatnot for it to be effective. That's not the case at all. What we want is our correction, when used as positive punishment, to push them into the wanted behavior. So he already knows that negative reinforcement turns it off. Now, if I'm walking and I say fetch and he doesn't, no, fetch. He knows how to turn it off.
And so you're essentially negative marking the non-compliance, if you will.
Yeah.
So you told him to fetch, he didn't do it, you're going to mark that and then apply it. So,
yeah.
So in relation to the cue or the marker, that's how you know the dog understands it as correction. And at the end of the day, as long as it invokes the action and the behavior, it does it. You know, the dog's not going to think of it in the same light that we are. They're not going to put the terms and language into it. But
I do see, like, so old habits die hard with people, and coming from a lot of people that were crank and yank trainers, I see this a lot. You know, I'll keep the e-collar on because usually the e-collar is heel, or any command that they want, they're pairing it with the correction versus pairing the correction with a no, and the behavior turns off.
Wow. Yeah, I can see that, because then
it becomes confusing.
Yeah, it's going to muddy it up, and you do that enough times, and it becomes almost the command becomes a correction, and so you're one sit. Right.
You're telling the dog fucking sit sucks.
Yeah. I don't want to sit. I hate that word.
Yeah. And sometimes just changing the command, the dog does it.
Well, and it's funny, like in the bird dog world, we talk about the watering down or the overusage of whoa becomes a negative thing, to where a lot of pointing dogs will default into a sit because, there's so much pressure and correction associated with that whoa command. They're going to get into a behavior that they know, like, this is safe. Yeah. And that results in them sitting. That'll result in some dogs running back to heel because this is a safe spot, right? Yeah. And it's just the dog is confused, and that's a good point to make, to where, like, you're giving a marker that's different than just repeating the command.
Yeah.
We say all the time, don't repeat the command.
Yeah.
The best you can. It's sometimes we're all human.
Yeah.
It happens.
We're animals, and so are they. They're not robots.
Right. Yeah. So all of this, it's making sense. Like, there's a ton of similarities, but enough differences to understand, to where, like, especially in the contrasting that against the more traditional ear pinch or something, I can see how this results. But I like how, like, throughout the whole thing, you're almost shaping every single step, where every single step is the dog's idea, rather than us shoving a bumper in the dog's mouth and saying hold. The action means nothing to the dog. The word hold means nothing to the dog, and the corrections of them not understanding. And we're just hoping that the dog pieces it up together enough to start figuring it out. And they will. They have been for generations.
Yeah.
But then when you get that first time handler that's already uneasy, maybe their timing sucks, their consistency sucks. That's where you end up with the guys on the table for 3 months and they're still on hold. And they're just like, they think that they're doing everything that they've been taught or told, but they're not, because they don't have the necessary skills to really be consistent enough for that dog to make its way through all of that junk.
And I hear people say all the time, like, oh, my dog's depressed, during force fetch, like, I need to lift his spirits. None of training should make your dog depressed. It should be fun for you and the dog. We're a team. And this is really showing them that I'll help you get there. You can figure it out.
Right.
Master coaching.
Yeah. So before we go get your dogs, because we're going to get your dogs, instead of having my hand through the loop or whatever, we're going to try and film these steps the best way we can. Obviously, we don't have 3 weeks to do this. At least the rain and the storms have kind of subsided for now. But we're going to take a fresh dog that's literally never been on this. He understands the marking and he's been shaped. So we're going to put him on. We're going to see how it goes. But then we also have your dog that has been through this so that we can better show the actual steps that we just kind of ran through.
Yeah.
That, again, what we started out on this, like this is more of a visual kind of episode, if you will. So if you haven't followed us yet, hit us up on YouTube. But before we get to your dogs, is there anything else while we're talking about this, before we jump into demonstrations and step-by-step instructions, is there anything else that you'd like to touch on before we wrap it up?
Just the biggest things the smallest things that I think that make the biggest impact is mark, then move. Don't try to shove shit down the dog's throat. Like let him show initiative to reach out and grab it. And don't move too quick. Don't ask for too much too quick. Time's on our side. And the more repetitions we get of the small steps to the wanted behavior, the quicker you'll get there versus asking for too much and failing.
And that's true regardless whether it's sports fetch or steadiness or whatever. Well, let's get the dogs. Let's hop on the table. Let's make this happen. And anybody listening to this, check the show notes. There'll be a YouTube link for this. And we'll just see what happens.
Yeah.
All right.